Hey team, Katie here from Equestrian Movement, and we are doing our last training in the Stronger Bond workshop for this time around. We are doing the Q&A session. So I'm just going to try and pull up this stream, make sure that it's all working because we know how bad I am at technology. I think we're good. Let me know if you can hear me and everything is working okay, because I'm not particularly good at the technology end of the equestrian business. Please excuse my face today. I am incredibly allergic to horses, so I have definitely had a bit of a flare. My eyes are super itchy and watery, and I'm a bit sniffly, so sorry that I have to put you through all of that. Such a good week doing our Stronger Bond workshop together again. I really enjoyed getting to know you guys and your horses and the problems that you're having. And I've really enjoyed seeing all of our students that have been through our trainability program in and joining in on the conversation. I think in particular, like watching you guys grow and seeing, the new problems that you have. We've worked through a lot of things together. It's not like ever a point of completion, though. We're never like got the perfect horse. We've never got, the perfect relationship that isn't continuously evolving and have its own trials and tribulations. So it's really nice to see like the way that the language, the communication, and the relationship has evolved for you guys, where it creates new situations where maybe you've got to the point of safe, secure, and connected with your horse, and you're still working on trust, faith, and confidence. And so the way that these layers can open up new possibilities with you and your horse. And this is something that I've been talking to Sarah about, actually, and one of my students is like, the safe, secure, and connected is achievable. It can be done even with our horses that have experienced trauma. But, the idea of doing your training in a way where you're not using, fear of threatening physical safety and whatnot as your motivator opens up a whole new language and potential with your horse when we are starting to talk about developing psychological safety. So the way that we continue to evolve our training and, keep up with the research that's coming out, we don't have to stay stuck in our dated training methods. It just requires some, ability to think laterally, have a little experiment and see what is working and what isn't working for your horse. So today is our Q&A. I'm going to use some video of one of the horses that we work with. But I just wanted to start a little bit with why we have chosen this method of training, why we use holistic horse handling skills, because of the comments that, we've had from our students. It's not the mainstream way of working with horses. And so I just wanted to start this with a little reminder of why we do it this way. So the most important thing to recognize is that everything that you do with your horse is influencing their chemistry, their biology, and your conditioning, how your horse responds to you and its environment. If we look at a lot of our traditional training skills, what your traditional training skills is doing is being very assertive to the point of dominant with how you talk to your horse and how you train your horse. And so then we're going to be triggering some of their survival instinct if we're getting to the point where they feel threatened. And so a lot of our traditional training tools are spooking our horses into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and then trying to pull them back out of it, work them through it. So, making them scared and then working them through their fear, making them scared and then working them through their fear, making them scared and then working them through their fear. Or, pick the fight, win the fight, pick the fight, win the fight, pick the fight, win the fight. So what we're talking about with holistic horse handling is that we're just not going to pick the fight in the first place. Like, what does this look like if we have a good relationship with our horse where we don't need to pick the fight to ask them to do something? And so then we can motivate them in different ways to cooperate and work with us. There are situations where we do need to be able to tell our horse what to do, and they listen for their own safety and for ours, and we shouldn't be putting ourselves into those situations until we have that kind of relationship established with our horse. But that kind of relationship isn't established within, even the first year of owning a horse. Your horse doesn't know who you are. They don't know if they can trust you. They don't know if their environment is safe. They don't feel safe to relax. And so a lot of the stuff that we challenge our horses with in that first year, we are going to see them, like, who is your horse if they're responding to what you're doing through fight, flight, or freeze. And what we're talking about when we talk about this is it's different areas of the brain. So the part of the brain that responds in flight, fight, or freeze is it fires half a second before the rational part of their brain kicks in. And so our horses are always going to respond first in a protect myself way, and then they're going to respond in then they're going to think. And so that's our job, right? Is like taking our horse away from just being reactive to us and being reactive to their environment, and getting them to think and make decisions and choices and whatnot. And so this is what we call emotional agility, is we're taking our horses out of their reactive part of their brain where they're not thinking, and we're trying to shift them into the prefrontal lobe, which is where they can consolidate memories, they can rationalize their decisions, and they can make choices. And so we do that, if you look at our holistic horse handling program, confidence through curiosity. Can't be scared and curious at the same time. So if we can create scenarios that elicit curiosity from our horse, then we're going to be doing emotional agility work. We're shifting them out of fear. If we are doing our training and we're looking at breaking our training with our horse down into small bite-sized achievements with an immense sense of satisfaction and reward, then we're going to be firing dopamine. So we're looking at, taking the horse's resistance towards being told what to do and moving it into like the joy of learning and how fun it is when you have task achievement. So this is the emotional agility part of our training. So we start with safe, secure, and connected. Does your horse feel safe to relax and sleep in their environment with you, within themselves and within their herd? And then we're moving into compassionate leadership. Does your horse have trust, faith, and confidence in the decisions you make for your horse, and in what you're doing and what you're asking of your horse? And that develops our psychological safety. And then we're looking at emotional agility, because it's still work. Like, how do we make work fun for our horse? How do we make being told what to do fun? And that can be like a lot of the problems that we're going to be talking about today. So it's really important that you have an awareness of how those things layer in on top of each other. And this is what we're talking about with like shifting away from traditional training methods, because there's so much more research available to us now. There's a lot of research that has gone into animal behavior and dissecting the horse brain. We don't have the MRI imaging of them actually while awake and whatnot, because they're too, like, they move too much. So it's going to, the MRI imaging is going to get them into that flight part of their brain anyway. So they have to be sedated to do the MRI imaging. But there's been, plenty of studies done and research done into the dissection of the horse brain, the hormones and the neurotransmitters that the horses have. And a lot of that has been transferred into animal behavior training and knowledge and research as well. So we're just trying to like link, the different research plus our experiences with our horse. The problem being that, we can create our experiences with our horse if we treat them as animals that aren't intelligent, that aren't emotional, that aren't sentient beings, that need to just do as they're told, that should just know what's expected of them and should just do it. And then if they become reactive, they're dangerous or naughty. Like we're creating these conditions ourselves. We're creating these horses ourselves. So if we aren't aware that our horse can have an emotional reaction to us, then we're not looking for it. And so we see these big behaviors as a horse being naughty. If we're not aware of how intelligent our horses are to problem solve, make decisions, and learn new words and new cues, then we think that every training session should be difficult and hard, and we have to work our horse through it and push him through it. Whereas what's often missing is like the clarity of the communication of what we want, because we are lacking the clarity in ourselves and in our training. So the thing that the research highlights is that a lot of functions are very similar to us. So if we look at the horse's brain, the part of the brain that is responsible for emotional states is there. The part of the brain that's responsible for like reacting to their environment, keeping themselves safe is there. And the part of the brain that is responsible for choices and decisions and problem solving and being able to rationalize is there as well. The big difference is in ratio wise compared to the human brain is that the prefrontal cortex is ratio wise. So the part of the brain that makes decisions and thinks clearly and learns is smaller ratio wise to the emotional part of their brain. So if anything, our horses are way more emotionally sensitive than we are, and not as able to make clear decisions as we are. So we kind of know that already, right? Through our experiences, we know that our horses are incredibly emotive and sensitive, and that sometimes when they get emotional, they don't make good decisions anymore. So our job is to keep taking them out of that emotional state and that safe, secure, like into the safe, secure, connected space, out of the reactive to their environment because they feel threatened space, and into the safe, secure, connected. And we want to do that consistently and then bring that into work. And if we're bringing it into work and we're seeing behaviors and emotions that would suggest that they're not coping with the work and they're starting to move into feeling threatened, or they're starting to move into not knowing what's expected of them, so feeling stressed or not being able to do it, so feeling stressed, or there's no marking of the task, so there's no task achievement, so they're going sour. They're starting to move into those places in training. We're going to use our emotional agility to shift them back out into safe, secure, connected, trust, faith, and confidence, and then how we can motivate them back up into work. So this is our emotional agility work, where we're recognizing the cues that they're not happy, and we're recognizing why. The main problem is us, because we're the ones that are asking them to work and to do things for us. And then we're trying to get to know our horses well enough to know how we can shape out and motivate behaviors for them so that they are on our team and they enjoy learning. So I'm going to share a little bit of this work with one of the horses that we have at the school, April. So there you can see she gives very loud cues. So it's really good to kind of watch it in action with a horse that's very clearly going through this process. And what we're going to do after that is we're going to talk about a couple of questions that have come through, but through watching this process, it's probably going to answer a lot of those questions for you. So I'm just going to go into the screen share now. So this is April. She isn't green, but she is young and she is nervous. She's done a lot of chasing cows, herding cows, and she has been ridden by, a stockman handler. She's a very sensitive and reactive chestnut mare, our favorites, right? And the first time I brought the saddle out to her, she was shaking so badly with fear that she nearly fell over. And so this isn't just like to do with our horses that have maybe experienced trauma, which I wouldn't say that April has, but she's just so sensitive and reactive that, being heard in and of itself could have been a trauma to her. It's not just about our trauma horses, it's also about how can we use our training skills in a way that keeps our horse out of that experience of feeling threatened by humans, and how do we build trust, faith and confidence in us so that we then have a confident horse that knows how to look after us. And this is one of the biggest challenges I have with working with horses and my students. If you're a professional in the industry, you don't need a horse that knows how to look after you. You train the horse to look after you. You train the horse to understand what's expected of it, and then they develop an understanding of how to look after you. A lot of the people that I work with are not professionals in the industry. They're beginners, or they're intermediate, or they're women coming back into riding after having a break, or, they're people that aren't going to be able to teach a horse how to look after them, and they need the horse to look after them. And so it takes a lot to build the confidence in a horse to know how to look after its rider. We are sitting on flight animals that their first instinct is to run, and that fires 0.5 of a second before they think clearly. And so if we fire the instinct to run and then we accelerate that instinct, then we're wiring in run first, think later. And our horses don't need any help with that. They're already very good at doing that. So bringing them into that state of relaxation first and saying, hey, you're safe. I'm not here to hurt you. And then actually seeing the horse hear that. So that's another thing as well. Like, you can be out with your horse trying to make it feel safe and just not know the body language of your horse is communicating that it feels safe. So, we need to hear that as well. And that's what we're going to go through with this body language with April. Is if we're telling our horses that they feel safe, then that they are safe, then we need to hear them if they've gotten to the point of communicating to us that they feel safe. And thankfully our horses are very good at communicating this. This is our first module in our holistic horse handling skills with Safe, Secure, Connected, is a horse that feels safe to relax and safe to go sleep. So if they don't feel safe, if they do feel threatened either by their environment, they haven't relaxed into us, or by us or whatever, then we're going to see them holding tension. So they're going to hold tension through their body, they're going to hold tension in their tail, they're going to hold tension in their neck, but in particular their jaw locks, and their jaw locks shut. So when we're shifting them out of the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism into a rest and digest mechanism, the first thing that we see is the whiskers twitching, and they just like wiggle. And then you might see the nerve up the side of their face start to fire, and then we'll see the licking and the chewing. And so that's our indication of the horse is coming out of that tense, feeling threatened experience and into safe, secure, and connected. So we do a lot of positive reinforcement. We do use treat training. We do figure out what's appropriate to the horse that we're working with. I find that when we're working with horses that have trauma or feel threatened, treats is very appropriate, because treats help them feel safe, and it makes it clear that we're marking a behavior and saying we like that behavior, motivating them to do it again. And then we're just helping them like bridge a little bit quicker that they are safe with us, because they might not really want us to touch us very much yet. But the treats can be our entry-level love language, our entry-level emotional motivator when they feel stressed or tense. So as I said at the beginning, the first time that I did this with April, she was so scared that she was shaking in fear and nearly fell over with how much she was shaking. So I like to do a lot of our training at liberty, because it means that if our horses feel unsafe or feel threatened, they have an exit and they can leave, and then they can come back when they feel safe and they feel better. So that is, part of our groundwork skills is we do positive reinforcement, we do negative reinforcement, we do liberty, and we do relaxation cues and understanding body language and behavior in our horses. And so by kind of bringing all of them together into our lesson plans and our training skills, we understand how to shape out our horse's emotional reaction to us. So at the moment, April is feeling a little bit of tension, but quite safe. Hey, Robin, how are you? We can see it in the soft swishes of her tail. We see it in their head carriage. So if their head is lower than their wither, they're generally quite relaxed. We're often told in our traditional horse training skills that that's a sign of submission, and we're trying to push them into a submissive state to get there. But more than that, if we think about it, if our horse feels safe and has trust, faith, and confidence in us, their head actually lowers because they're not alert and keeping an eye on their environment and their threats. They've kind of given that responsibility over to us. So like, okay, if you want me to feel safe to relax, you want me to lower my head, you first have to not be the threat, and then you have to keep an eye on all the threats around me so that I can relax. And so that's the part of the relationship that we're looking to develop here, is that our horse feels safe to relax and then feels safe to give us the responsibility of keeping them safe as well. You have to remember, like, this is very important to horses, is their felt sense of safety. And so one of the exercises that we do to encourage this is choice and consent. We do this through targeting. And so that's how we're going to introduce the things that they're scared of. So that's how we're going to introduce the tack up here, that the tack up process that April's very scared of. And we're going to build willingness into our work, because she has a choice over whether she gets tacked up or not. So giving her that control over what happens to her. Again, we're seeing nice gentle swishes of the tail, some that is relaxation of tension out of her neck. That tension is building because she wants her treat, but she's not getting it because she's not stepping up for the saddle cloth. So we will see tension building just with work with our horses if we're not marking answers for them and telling them that yes, that's correct, and giving them praise there. So she gives us a really nice example when we get the saddle out of why I do this at Liberty as well. So we have all of our exercises in our first module of the Holistic Horse Handling Program of Safe, Secure, and Connected, where you can invite them into you, and the invitation of them approaching you is their consent to your next ask. So we're giving our horse control over what is happening to them, and that builds confidence, faith, and trust. So recognize that she's moving away from the horse that is over there towards me, who has the saddle, of which she was incredibly fearful of initially. So that is like, we're seeing signs here and now. If we had her tied up in cross ties and we put the saddle cloth on, and then we put the bridle on and we put the saddle on and we get her up and we hopped on, like, that's the tension mounting. That would be tension mounting, right? So it would get to the point where we would be in the saddle and then she would be incredibly explosive and I wouldn't be able to control what she was doing. And so then the only option that you have once you get to that point is to buck them out and make sure that you sit it, or at the very least that you fall off and you get back on. Because you've put them into that situation, right? If you've like had the tension build, you've not listened, you've hopped on their back and you're still not listening, and now they're bucking, and you've pushed them to the point where they now know the only way that they can get you to stop doing the thing that they're scared of is to buck you off. And so we can accidentally condition, these behaviors into them as quickly or quicker than our horses that we listen to them when they say, I don't feel okay with this right now. We say, okay, that's fine. Like, why? We rule out pain. We make sure they feel safe, secure, connected. We build trust, faith, and confidence. We move into our emotional agility, and then we're going to step our way through, the things that we need our horse to be able to do, to be good horses that are safe to ride, know how to look after us, enjoy learning, and us to be ridden. So this is our process of teaching our horses to ask to be ridden. We ask for consent with the tack. It starts out just as targeting. And then we're going to move into the same consent work in the saddle. So if we just skip ahead of some of this conversation. We can see the moment that she says yes. So we've got the tension shaking out of her ears and her neck there. A little bit of connection work here. And then we're going to ask her to step up so that we can put the saddle on. You can see there's a little bit of tension there. She has all of the opportunity to run if she needs to, but she stands, and then we can stand with relaxation. So this is one of our first trainings in holistic horse handling, is our stand with relaxation skills, because it's so transferable for everything else that we do. If we can tell our horse what to do, then our horse builds confidence in us. If we can tell them to stand with relaxation, then we have safe, secure, and connected. And we can take that into every training scenario we go into, so that our horses don't feel intimidated or threatened or unsure, because we've told them all I need from you is to stand with relaxation. And then when they start to get heightened, they're getting closer to shifting out of relaxation, then we can come back and say, hey, remember, all I need is stand with relaxation. And then we can motivate them into more walk, and then we work, and then we're going to say stand with relaxation. So you can see there where I've asked, so I've put the saddle on. The saddle is the thing that she doesn't want. I've taken a step away and given her a moment to process. I've stepped away myself, and that's our little fist bump for consent there, is are you ready for the next ask? Are you ready for me to do this with you? And so you just have a little patience and you wait. So this is why these are our prerequisites as well. All of this has to be trained in before we're having the conversation about the scary saddle. And then even once we have the conversation about the scary saddle, we need to be paying attention to if everything is progressing well along those lines as well. So if we skip ahead, we can see why the main reason why our horses are why April is scared of the saddle is because she's a bit scared and hypervigilant when she's ridden. So if we have those relaxation skills that we've cued in on the ground, and we know how to communicate that to them, and they know how to shift themselves into that place of feeling safe and relaxation, then we can continue that conversation in the saddle when the tension is building in the saddle. And we can skip ahead a little bit as well. So hopping on April, she is very tense, holds a lot of tension through her body, but she also has a super little work ethic. So this is what makes a good stock horse, right? Is they're very fit, they're very athletic, they're very cued in and sensitive and ready to work. So we're looking at making work relaxing and enjoyable for them. And we're seeing some nice relaxation cues here. We've got the licking and the chewing. We've got the gentle swishes of the tail. So she's not particularly stressed about being ridden, but she's very close to threshold. It's not going to take much to tip her over into being in a reactive state. And so what I want her to do is understand that all that is required of her in the saddle is for her to listen to or know her cues, her bit pressure cues, and to be able to communicate through the bit. But more than anything else is just to be able to let go of tension and relax. Because the horse that feels safe, secure, connected in the saddle, the horse that has trust, faith, and confidence in their rider in the saddle, then is able to listen to what is being asked of it without becoming sensitive or reactive, and is able to respond to us in the same way, but then is also able to communicate to us if there's a problem, so that we can support the de-escalation of whatever their problem is. So sometimes, or a lot of the time, the stress is just not knowing what the right thing is. And this is why we have our learning how to learn module, where, if the horse has just been pressured into figuring out what the aids are, then learning itself is very stressful, is very high pressure. And so it's hard to keep them in that state of relaxation. But to actually learn how to learn, the process is guide the behavior, mark the behavior, motivate the behavior. And if we are doing that consistently, then our horse learns the routine, the method, the consistency of how that's going to show up for them. And then learning isn't so stressful, because somehow we're going to shape their behavior. And so that can be pressure, or that can be, guiding them through body language and movement. And we're going to let them know, yes, that's what I asked, or no, that's not what I asked. And then if they get what we ask, then we're going to motivate them to do again in whatever emotional motivator we've chosen that works well for us and our horse. So in the saddle, you can see that I'm using the pats as my emotional motivators. I've also cued Yasin on the ground to let her know that the ask that I'm asking of her, she's getting right. And so here we're going to see a really big relaxation process from her, where she's like, oh, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. So we see the big head shake, we see her rub her knee, we've got the licking and the chewing. So, she is showing us signs of relaxation. But the things that we teach is we can always love harder, and we can always relax deeper. And so that's what we're looking for here. She's letting go, shaking some tension out, and then we're starting to see the bigger yawning, where she's stretching the jaw out, because that's where they hold the tension when they're in fear. The gentle swishes, rubbing her nose on her leg. So all of those things are showing her coming out of that more fight, flight, freeze part of her brain and into a more relaxed part of her brain. And that's really important when we're learning, because the horses that can't control their emotions can't control their behavior. And if they're not in a state of safe, secure, and connected, they can't learn very well either. So they learn reactively when they're in the fight, flight, freeze part of the brain. They don't learn how to problem solve. So if we do it this way, where we're showing them that there's a process, shape, mark, motivate, then they understand the process for when we introduce something new, they can figure it out. They know how to figure it out. That's what learning how to learn is. Whereas if we have, pressure, and they have to figure out the answer of pressure, and they have to figure out the answer of pressure, and they have to figure out the answer, then every time we go teach them something new, it's the whole learning process again, because there's no routine method or consistency in how they figure out what the answer is. So this is, April releasing tension of being ridden, feeling safe, secure, and connected, having trust, faith, and confidence. She is able to let go of some previous tension that she's had about riding that made her scared of the saddle. And so this is that idea of working her through a behavior, but we're going to work her through that behavior not because she is being pushed or pressured, but because we actually have a process that's going to show her, that the way that her brain has been previously wired, the way that her behavior has been previously wired is not required of her So she doesn't need to be scared. She doesn't need to feel threatened. She doesn't need to be fearful. She has control over what happens to her. And all we're asking of her is for her to relax. And so we're rewiring the learning process so that she is able to build confidence and trust in herself, her horse, like her trainer, handler, horse person, whatever, and she's able to build trust, faith, and confidence in that relationship, what happens to her, in herself, and in her environment. And so that's how we're going to, so a horse that can't control its emotions, can't control its behavior, rather than trying to physically control these horses and physically control their behavior, we're going to control the environment. We're going to control what happens to them. And so we're going to have a different impact on how they emotionally and behaviorally react to their environment and their training session. And so then through not having to physically control the horse, we manage to control them because we're controlling their emotional state based off of how well we know them, what motivates them, how to communicate with them, and how to, not have those environmental situations where they're triggered into feeling unsafe and they're feeling threatened, and we're not going to fire that part of their brain. So hope that was helpful. So just remembering why we do it this way is that there is a biological process that our horses are going through when they are reacting emotionally, when they are reacting with big behaviors. There is a, excuse me. There is the biology being fired. There are neurotransmitters being released. There are hormones being released that we don't have any control over. So, and the horse doesn't have any control over it either. That's why we say a horse that can't control its emotions can't control its behavior. If you trigger the flight response unintentionally, they're going to have all of the hormones released to run. And then we're going to tell them not to run. And so that's where they get like super squirrely and their behavior gets really erratic, because the only way to metabolize those hormones out of their body is for them to actually run. So if we can just keep them away from that point in the first place, and we can shape out like different responses because they feel safe, secure, and connected, and because they have trust, faith, and confidence, and because we understand how to shape them emotionally as well, then we're going to have a positive response to our ask, and that's how we develop a willing, consenting horse. So that brings us to our first question, which was the horse that was rearing with the desensitization process. So you've just seen a little bit about how we desensitize horses. So when our horses are being traditionally desensitized, all the person is looking for is the stand part. And so our horse can be standing still, but still be scared. They can still be in their fear state. They can still have the fight, flight, or freeze part of their brain being triggered, but they've just been conditioned that freeze is the appropriate response. And so then, there's always a point where the horse can't control itself anymore. And then depending on the personality type or the situation, if they have an exit, they're going to run. And if they don't have an exit, they're going to go over the person, over the human. So what we do with desensitization is we do stand with relaxation. So I want first the horse to have the skills to take itself out of the fear state of its brain and into the relaxed state of its brain. And then I want it to do it while it's standing still without any environmental trigger or situation. And then I'm going to think about, okay, stand with relaxation with this thing that you're scared of, or stand with relaxation while this is how we desensitize the horses to the whips and the tools and things that we're going to use on them, as well as we do consent to use the tool, stand with relaxation, and then the desensitization while paying attention to their relaxation cues. Are they still relaxed, or do we need to go deeper? And so then we're going to create emotional agility around the tools that we're using. So that plus our confidence through curiosity. So the curiosity takes the horse out of the fear state. So if we're talking about desensitizing to a tool, quite often I don't need to do the confidence through curiosity training. But if we're talking about like our training with Ella the pig, where the horse was scared of the pig, with Phoenix with umbrellas and prams, like there's actually it's the training that I've done with the Pony Club, where I've taken the letterbox with the balloons and the blow up kangaroo and that kind of thing, where you've actually got an object that the horse is fearful of. Then we're going to do confidence through curiosity, where you teach them to target, and so they learn how to be curious of the things that they're scared of, rather than their instinct to just run away being triggered first. So that again is our emotional conditioning. So what I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, was talking about, I think it was Charlie. What Charlie was talking about with her horse is that when she was needing to do desensitization with her horse, because its previous experience of trauma means that it's very highly escalated a lot of the time. And so she's just trying to get it to be less reactive. So if we're looking at our horse's body language at the desensitization process, we're going to see like the first no is their lips lock tight, the tension goes up through their body, and their head goes high. That's their first, like, nope, not okay. And so some horses, we can get to just stay there, and we can rub, the whatever we're using over them, and they just stay there, and then we can take it away. And so we're conditioning the stand into them. But some horses, a horse that can't control its emotions, can't control its behavior, a horse that is so fearful that it can't control itself to stand still anymore and just needs to run away, we're going to see those behaviors escalate. So the next thing that the horse started to do was try and back, so finding their escape route. And then when there is no escape route, so the backing didn't work, then the next thing that we're going to see is the horse starting to fight for its survival. So that's where we're going to see the rearing. That might escalate to rearing and striking out, because now they're scared of the human for putting them in that situation. They feel threatened, or they're going to pull hard enough that they pull the rope out of our hands. So you've got two choices there. They're either going to fight or they're going to run. And so some of our horses, particularly our trauma horses, do choose to run first. And so when we're working with horses that have experienced severe trauma, they're always looking for an out. And so if we corner them and we prevent that out, then they have no qualms with taking out the human in the process of creating their exit strategy. And they always are looking for where their exit strategy is while they tolerate what you're doing to them. Some horses that feel threatened will lash out at the human instead. So they sit more in our confident end of the spectrum, where they're confident enough in themselves to take out the human that is making them feel threatened, rather than running away from them. So these horses, the relationship isn't good enough for them to feel safe for the human to do what they're doing to the horse. But they're confident and self-assured within themselves. So they're confident to take out the thing that they're scared of. Whereas we have our horses on the other end of the spectrum that are more spooky and reactive. And so if they don't like what the human is doing to them, they're going to choose to run, and they're going to be flighty instead. So that's also part of knowing your horse. Like, does your horse choose reactivity, or does your horse choose to, escalate in its dominant behaviors? So we have that as a free training over on our website as well, for figuring out what your horse's personality type is. It's super important to be aware. Like, it's what we were talking about with Sarah the other night, is that you can't train an Australian draft the same way as you train an Arab. you have to be flexible and adapt into, where does that horse go into the fight, flight, or freeze part of their brain? Like, when are they going to get there? What kind of pressure? How do you need to set up the environment to keep them away from it? And so our draft horse isn't going to go there very often because he's confident enough in himself and he's bred to be fairly ignorant of his environment while he drags a paddock. But our Arab is going to be more flighty because we need that athleticism. The athleticism has been bred into them for their work that they need to do, which is like endurance and whatnot. And so they're going to, choose reactivity and physical movement and running away from the threat first, rather than just standing with relaxation. So being aware of your horse's personality type is very important when you're choosing. And this is about being very strategic and intentional about how you're setting up your training sessions, how you're doing your shaping plans, how you're doing your lesson plans. And if that is too much for you, like that's what we've got in our holistic horse handling program, is we've got the whole shaping plan laid out for you with how to break it down, how to cue it in, I think like the most difficult thing about like the cueing process is figuring out how you're going to shape the behavior, how you're going to communicate to your horse how you're going to shape that behavior. Because it's like, when you're trying to teach a dog to sit, like they don't know the word sit until you teach it to them. They don't know the behavior associated to the word until you teach it to them. And so there's so many different methods for how you're going to shape your dog into the sit. Like you can push down on their butt, but if you don't like the idea of pushing down on your dog's butt, you're going to use the treat and get them to shift their balance back into the sit. So that's like, what the equestrian industry is right, is that it depends on your values and how you feel about working with your horse as to how you're going to choose what method is going to shape that behavior. But every process at some point has to align with shape the behavior, mark the behavior, motivate the behavior. So it's up to you to be clear in your values and how you want to work with your horse so that you understand what method is going to teach you the way that you want to work with your horse to shape the behavior, mark the behavior, motivate the behavior. So if we look at positive reinforcement, we're shaping with that using aversive tools, and we're marking with a clicker, and we're motivating with treats. That's why positive reinforcement can be so successful, is because the shaping, the marking, and the motivating process is so clear that it's hard to kind of fail at it, aside from having horses getting super excited and mugging you and frisking you for treats. When we're doing negative reinforcement, you're going to be using your tool, so halter, whip, legs, bit, whatever it is, and you're going to be applying pressure with it. And then when the horse gives you the response, you're going to mark it and then release it is the motivation. And then we add to that our positive reinforcement, which is pats, verbals, or treats. So that's where we get lost in the training situation, is if we're going to use negative reinforcement, we're going to use pressure to try and shape the behavior, and our horse doesn't know how to respond appropriately to pressure because they see it as threatening them, as threatening their physical safety. And so then we're triggering behavioral issues because our horse doesn't feel safe. Whereas if we can take them into safe, secure, and connected first, and then we can build trust, faith, and confidence second, then our pressure cues are no longer punishment cues. They're no longer fear of threat of physical safety. They're just tools of communication. They're just like words. But we have to also then not use our tools for that as well, because that's also part of what we teach is, not engaging in the horse's emotional response, because if you do get frustrated, or you do get angry, or you do get overwhelmed, or you do get scared, then you can accidentally escalate the way that you're using these pressure tools into threatening the horse's physical safety just purely by accident because you've gotten scared of them and you don't know how else to respond, things like that. So it's like, don't become emotionally engaged in how your horse is responding first. If they're reacting, get your horse back down into safe, secure, connected, safe to relax, relaxation cues, and then we're going to create achievable wins. So that's where we talk about small goalposts and adjustable goalposts, so that we're going to set our horse up for success, an achievable win, so that they enjoy the learning process, and that's how we're going to motivate their behavior. But as we were talking about, I think it was on day 3, like even getting the dopamine and the reward for work can get our horses over threshold and overstimulated as well. So it's for them even to like be at, how are you going to like it can even just not be excited. They can also start getting stressed because we're like firing that people pleasing part of their brain where they're like trying to get the answer, and we get the anticipatory behaviors and they start to get anxious to please. So it's being able to recognize the tension, where the tension is coming from, and how you're going to de-escalate it before you bring them back into work again. So this is being very aware, being very intentional and strategic about how you're going to do your training. But then also, like on the other side, is your reflection process is very important as well. So your training process, like you go in, you work with your horse, it kind of goes however which way it's going to go. You have to just respond in the moment with the skills that you have and the knowledge that you have. And then you're either going to come out of it and go, yes, that was amazing. It was so good. Like we worked so well together. Or you're going to come out of it and you're going to be like, that was trash. I'm the worst. My horse needs a better rider. I need a different horse. I need a horse more suited to me. And then if we don't do the reflection work, we're going to take that same energy into our next training session. So if you've come out of that previous training session and you're like, I'm the worst, I'm not a good rider, I'm not good enough for my horse, then you're going to go into the next training session thinking the same thing. And so then you're going to create the problems, which is the conflict that Sarah has been talking about this week. If we do our reflection process well, we're going to come out of the training session and we're going to say, what worked well, what didn't work well, why, how do I feel about the training session, why didn't it work well, how can I change the next one to try and create a more positive outcome. And so maybe then you'll see, well, actually the first 10 to 15 minutes went really well. And I just pushed it too far. I pushed it too hard. I repeated the ask too many times. I didn't praise the horse enough for the yes. And so they started to get frustrated. So there's different things that we're going to look at in our reflection part of our training session to set us up better for next time. So if it did go well, we're going to say, why did it go well? How can we improve on it? And then we're going to adapt each lesson plan as we go in. But once we're in there, we're kind of just like doing the best we can to respond to our horses in the best way we know how. So then if we talk about our second question, which the basis of what I could figure out about that question was that the horse was green and grumpy about being asked to work. And so sometimes I do think that getting, horses that have experienced abuse and trauma are a little bit easier to work with because all you have to do is make them feel safe and make them not feel threatened, and they're willing to do anything for you because they know how bad the world could be. Whereas our horses that have grown up in a life of safe, secure, and connected, they're still in the same property that they were bred on, they've been handled well, they've not experienced trauma, they've not experienced like difficulties in any way, shape, or form. The most difficult thing for them is learning how to learn, and the just the work that's involved in physical work, like physical work is pain. Carrying the rider is uncomfortable. Wearing the bridle and the saddle is uncomfortable. Physical output of energy is painful. Anybody who does any exercise knows that there's no pain, there's no gain. It hurts to exercise. And so, like, this is the aversive that our safe, secure, connected horses, like, the biggest aversive they have experienced is just working. And so they can be a little bit harder to motivate and shape the behavior out with. And so it's really about, really understanding your horse's temperament. So from what I could gather about this particular horse without being able to dig into the information any deeper, is that this is a horse that's confident enough in itself to say, I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. And so then the question becomes, how do we motivate the horse that doesn't enjoy learning, that doesn't enjoy what we're doing to them, without just pressuring them into saying yes? So that's our emotional agility section of our holistic horse handling skills, is knowing your horse well enough to know what its emotional motivators are, structuring your training session to get little dopamine hits. So all of the horses that I've broken in, and some of the horses that are older that I've had on retraining, when you hop off, they're happy. They're like, oh, I had a good time. Like, that was really good. I really enjoyed the learning process. They all give this like little like nicker thing. And while you can see within the training session that maybe they get a little bit frustrated, or they get like a little bit resentful of what's being asked of them, we can get to that point by the end that they're enjoying the learning and the challenge and the difficulties of learning. And so that's why we have to be very careful to not overface our horses. We have to be very aware, like in our holistic horse handling program, we've just got some rules for us as trainers to keep our own ego in check so that we're not souring our horse on the work that we're doing. So an example is 3 repetitions change the ask. 3 repetitions of a certain ask is enough for your horse to see that there's a routine and a process and a consistency for them to know that the answer they're choosing is correct, but not so many repetitions that they've gone sour on what we're asking them to do. Adjustable goalposts. If you've gone into your training session today being like, okay, I want to do some cantering, I want to do some jumping, we're going to get up to 50 centimeters. That's my goal for today. And then you go down into the paddock and your horse won't let you catch them, then you know that it's going to be a bad day, and you can't be setting yourself with big goals. You've got to, your horse doesn't know that your goal for the day was to canter and go do some jumps. Your horse is just following your lead on what you're asking them to do. So if you can change your goals to be like, all right, you don't want me to catch you today. Today's goal is just for you to enjoy me and not associate me with work so that I can catch you. Or if your horse, like April, is starting to show some tension around the tacking up process, our goal for today, so if we have tension around tacking up, then we're going to have tension around mounting, and so like we have problems with our horses not standing at the mounting block, and then we're going to have tension around work, and then we're going to canter them or jump them, and then they start bucking, and we're like, where did the bucking come from? Well, they were communicating it the whole way along. It's just that we weren't paying attention to the small cues from them, and we just were asking more of them, so the tension builds until they can't control their behavior anymore. So if we do our emotional agility instead, and we say, okay, the thing that I'm going to work on today is not having tension around the tack. So we're going to take one trigger out of their life and do our emotional agility work to flip it into a positive experience of having their tack put on. And so it's one less stress that is mounting the stress of the training session to the point that they can't control them. We had a really good interview recently on the podcast with Ben Hart from Hart's Horsemanship, and all of this kind of stuff, like how to be a good trainer for your horse, how to be a good leader for your horse. A lot of it is mindset stuff. And talking to him, like it's even changed my mindset again. So a lot of what I'm doing when I'm training is I'm looking for tension, and I'm looking for the tension mounting and accumulating, and I'm trying to stop before it becomes a behavior. And so talking to Ben and his way of training is looking for opportunities for praise. And so you can see how that can so significantly change your training as well. So like if I'm just looking for tension mounting, but then I change it and I'm looking for opportunities for praise, then like the tension isn't going to mount in the first place, right? It's like if we're consistently telling our horse what to do, praising them, telling them what to do, praising them, telling them what to do, praising them, then we're not going to see, you know, the tension mounting of the resentment and the frustration to begin with. And this is most frequently what we're dealing with our young green horses, is that what we're asking of them to do is the most challenging thing that they've ever had to do. And so, excuse me, we're looking for, you know, the behaviors that we get are them just saying no to the learning process and not enjoying the learning process. So if we're looking at reshaping that experience for them, which is possible, it's achievable, I've done it with horses a million times over, is that we can take them out of the resentment towards learning, the resentment towards aversives like our bit, and we're taking them away from that just like the human doing things with me sucks situation, and we're taking it into a, oh, this is fun, oh, I enjoy being challenged and learning. Like I feel good if I've had a small challenge that I've overcome and I've learned something from it. Like that is an amazing experience for us. It is what I love about teaching students, is that like aha moment where they feel amazing for overcoming a challenge. And same with the horses. It's just that if we aren't strategic in how we structure our training session, and we're not creating the opportunity for our horse to actually overcome the challenge, then it doesn't feel good. So if we create a challenging environment or a challenging situation for our horse, for ourselves, for our own personal gain, let's say, for example, getting into the canter, we really want to canter our horse. And so the challenge is the horse cantering. If, you know, if we're drilling them and pushing them into canter, and then we get a canter, and then we're like, yes, I finally got it. And so then we're like, okay, let's canter again. Then there's no place there where the horse has felt good about the achievement. And so that's how we sour our horses. We've got to make sure that we're like creating a situation where they feel successful and they feel like they've overcome a challenge when they do. So how long we stretch that achievement out is a really big part of the shaping process, and a really big thing that can go wrong for us in training, and why we have those lesson plans in the holistic horse handling program. Say, for example, like trying to get your horse on the float. It can be very black and white. Your horse is either on the float or they're not on the float. But quite frequently, if we're asking the horse to get on the float, you know, the first place they say no is at the tailgate. And then they might get both feet in, and then like just on the tailgate, and then they'll stop. And then they might get like both feet, front feet into the float with the hind feet off the tailgate, and they'll stop again there. And then they might get both hind feet onto the tailgate, and then they might stop there. And normally we might like get them a little bit further into the float, and then they'll run out, or we'll get them the whole way into the float and they won't relax and they'll run out. So there's plenty of opportunities there for our horse to miss the win and us to keep the pressure on, if we have gone in very black and white, where my horse is either in the float or not in the float. And so, it's important that we're not reinforcing them to run off the float and run out of the float, but it's also very important to mark and reward those little achievements. So just getting them to come up to the back of the tailgate and stand with relaxation, like that in itself can be a win for some horses. We've had a couple of students going through, or a couple of members of the Stronger Bond process, Stronger Bond community going through that process with their horses recently. Is just like, how can you break your task down to be more achievable challenges where you're setting your horse up for success, and then able to find ways of reinforcing them and motivating them to try again, keeping them out of the fear part of their brain, keeping them in the learning part of the brain, and creating situations and challenges where we're building our horses' faith, trust, and confidence in us within the challenge that we're presenting them with. So if we do the same situation, we're trying to get our horse onto a float, escalates to fighting, pulling on their head, they're pulling away, they're rearing, we're not building our horse's safe, secure, connected relationship with us. We're not building faith, trust, and confidence in us. We're not doing our emotional agility, so we're just escalating their flight behavior. And then it becomes this point where it's impossible to get this horse on a float. But if we change the scenario to like, how can we keep our horse feeling safe, secure, connected within this experience? How can we use this challenge to build faith, trust, and confidence? How can we use this challenge to teach our horse that it's fun to learn, to overcome smaller challenges feels good. The process of overcoming challenge and succeeding feels good, so that it's setting them up for the next time they have to do something challenging, that they're ready. They know how to manage themselves, they know how to deal with the experience, and they're looking to us as their trainer and their leader and their handler for guidance on best ways to navigate this challenge. So that's like really the key understanding that I want you guys to have from this Stronger Bond workshop process, is that you can put yourself into these training sessions and you can structure them in a way that breaks your horse's faith, trust, and confidence in you, that wires your horse into fight response, that makes everything that you do with your horse conflict, and that means that they don't feel safe to relax with you. Or you can use these training processes to build the quality of the relationship. And it's the process of building the quality of relationship that actually gets them to face the bigger challenges that you want to do, like navigating the flowing river, like going over the bridge that covers the flowing river that my students had to do at their most recent obstacle course day. Like, it's these places that you have the opportunity to show up for your horse, or to do little micro tears in the relationship with your horse. That is the potential of each and every situation that you go into, which is why we need to be very intentional and strategic in how we present ourselves and our horses to each situation, which is why it's so helpful to have a lesson plan to refer to for like how you're going to step each small win on the previous small win, so that everybody feels good and feels like they've achieved something from the process. So that's a basic broad kind of overview of like what we do with our training, how we handle the horses the way that we handle them, why we choose this method, and why we keep choosing this method every time. And that's something that you might find yourself up against, is when you see other professionals or peers in the industry that are saying that's not how we've always done it, that makes dangerous horses. Then it's about being advocates for your horse and saying, well, actually, there's a lot more research out now and there is a better way, and we can implement it to create safer horses than the horses that we had previously. And what you'll recognize if you follow this kind of method and this training is that there are a lot of very good trainers that are using it, but they're using it intuitively and they don't know how to teach it. So they'll be training the skills, they'll be training the method, but intuitively they're responding to the horse's emotional needs through previous experience of knowing a horse communicating its emotional needs to them. And so we can skip the 20 years of experience that you need with horses to understand their emotional needs to respond to them intuitively. And we can actually just learn how a horse responds to us emotionally and what their body language is expressing with the way that they're like with what they're trying, what their body language is expressing through their behavior and through their body languages, so that rather than having to put ourselves and our horses into these big situations that they aren't ready for and we aren't ready for and trying to push them through it to the other side to get a yes, we can say, well, actually there's about 10 steps that we need to get very good at first before we even try that challenge. And then we're going to try that challenge and then we're going to reflect on it and figure out if it went well, if it didn't go well, why did it go well, why didn't it go well. And we're going to come back to these 10 steps that were supposed to lead us up to that point and figure out where the gaps are in those 10 steps that meant that neither of us were ready for the challenge. And we're just going to keep going through that. And then we're going to have a safe, secure, connected horse that has trust, faith, and confidence in us, emotional agility skills, communication skills. And so that's where our best chance of actually achieving those challenges are. So you'll start looking at these, professionals and being able to say, oh, I actually saw a very small relaxation cue in the horse. And that's when the handler decided to ask again. Or, oh, I just saw a very small tension cue in that horse. And that's where the trainer backed off. And so the trainer won't be communicating that. You'll just notice them back off the pressure of the aid or pressure of what they're doing, because the integration is so intuitive. Your feel is so intuitive that's like you feel the horse tense or you feel the horse soften, and it adapts how you present yourself to them. And so by understanding how the hormones are working, how the neurotransmitters are working, and how the brain is working, and how the nervous system is working, you can start to see that these relationships are playing out in every situation. And it's about your feel. So your feel is that intuitive response to what your horse is doing, and how you can use it to communicate more effectively and to keep your horse in that more appropriate learning part of their brain. So I hope you've really enjoyed our Stronger Bond community. We have heaps of stuff still planned for the next term. I've just finished planning it all out. We've got some awesome interviews coming up on the podcast, as I said, with Ben Hart from Hart's Horsemanship. And we've got the Donkey Queen coming in, the Holistic Hooves, the donkey farrier, coming in for a podcast interview. I've got some trainings coming up on YouTube. And we've got our theme days for the weekdays as well. So keep us posted, keep talking to us, keep sharing, and let's be part of the movement that shifts the trajectory of the horse industry, so we can go from having horses that don't feel safe and that feel threatened in training to having safe, secure, connected horses that have trust, faith, and confidence in humans, and that ask to be ridden and enjoy learning. Until next time, have a good weekend. Is it still a weekend? It's Easter holidays for us here. So I hope you've had a lovely Easter, and we will see you in the group. Thanks for watching. Bye.